The night had been still. No thunder, no wind, only the kind of silence that makes you believe the world is holding its breath. When Ethan woke, it wasn't the alarm that stirred him. It was the quiet, the kind that feels wrong. He reached across the bed. Cold sheets. Empty space. Mara's scent, lavender and smoke, still hung in the air, but faintly, as though it were slipping away too. He blinked against the dim light bleeding through the curtains, waiting for his eyes to adjust, waiting for her silhouette to reappear. It didn't. Mara. His voice was low, uncertain. The word felt swallowed by the stillness. He pushed himself upright, listening. No shower running. No clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs, steady as a heartbeat. Her phone was still charging by the nightstand. Her watch lay beside it, keys untouched. That wasn't like her. He swung his legs off the bed, his bare feet meeting the cold wooden floor. A faint breeze moved through the cracked window, one she always kept shut before sleeping. He walked to it, half hoping she'd be out in the yard, wrapped in her coat, talking to someone, doing anything that made sense. But the yard was empty. The gate stood open. He turned back. That's when he saw it. A folded note on the nightstand, half hidden under her book. No envelope. Just his name on the front, Ethan, written in her looping script. His chest tightened. He hesitated before picking it up, as if the air might split open once he did. The note was short. Only 3 words. Don't look for me. He read it twice, 3 times, searching for something he missed. A joke, a hint, anything. But there was nothing else, no explanation, no signature. Just those words. His mind raced. Maybe she'd gone to her sister's. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe this was some kind of twisted prank. Yet deep down, beneath every rational excuse, something colder began to settle. A feeling that she hadn't just left. She'd vanished. He moved through the house, calling her name softly. Every corner felt unfamiliar. The kitchen light flickered as he passed, illuminating the 2 untouched mugs from last night's tea. One of them still had a faint lipstick mark. By the back door, he noticed faint mud prints on the tile, her boots, heading out into the rain. Only one set. No return tracks. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. He stepped outside, the wet grass chilling his feet. The street was empty, save for the hum of a streetlight struggling to stay alive. The clock inside struck 3. He came back in, soaked and shivering, clutching the note. He sat on the edge of the bed again, staring at it. The paper trembled in his hand. That's when he noticed something faint, written just beneath the main line, words so light he almost missed them. He held it closer to the lamp. The ink had smudged, like it had been erased in a hurry. But he could still make it out. It's happening again. The words hit him harder than the cold ever could. Again? What did she mean, again? Ethan froze, every sound in the house suddenly louder, sharper. The clock ticked like footsteps. The rain outside turned heavier. He looked toward the dark hallway, his heart thudding fast. And somewhere deep inside, a memory stirred, something he couldn't quite reach. He didn't know it yet, but that note wasn't the beginning of Mara's disappearance. It was the return of something he'd already lost once before. The note wouldn't leave his mind. It's happening again. The words looped in Ethan's head like a whisper he couldn't silence. He sat at the kitchen table, the clock creeping toward dawn, watching the rain streak down the window. The house felt emptier now, like it was holding a secret it refused to share. He reached for Mara's phone, still on the charger. The screen lit up, revealing her last call log. A single entry stood out, 12:03 a.m., just before she vanished. Unknown number. Blocked ID. Duration, 2 minutes, 21 seconds. He tried calling back. A mechanical voice told him the number didn't exist. Ethan frowned. Mara never hid her calls. She'd even teased him about checking her messages once. You'd get bored. It's all grocery lists and spam. But this wasn't spam. This was different. He scrolled through her texts, her photos, her notes, searching for anything out of place. Nothing. She hadn't written to anyone in days. It was as if the call had appeared from nowhere and pulled her out of his life. The silence pressed closer. He remembered her expression at dinner last night, distracted, glancing at the clock, biting her lip the way she did when she was hiding something. When he'd asked if she was okay, she just said, "I will be after tonight." After tonight. The words now sounded like a farewell. He rubbed his temples, trying to remember more. Around midnight, he'd been half asleep when her phone buzzed. She'd slipped out of bed, answering in a whisper. He'd heard fragments through the door, her saying, "It can't happen twice, not again." Then silence. When she returned, she'd lain awake for a long time, her breathing uneven. Ethan rose, pacing the floor. The air felt heavier now, charged. He picked up his own phone and opened the recent calls list. Nothing from the same number. No trace. He tried redialing the last few incoming numbers anyway, desperate for something familiar. That's when it rang. He froze. The display showed, unknown caller. Same timestamp as Mara's last call. The same one that didn't exist. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." No response. Only static, soft, distant, like wind over a radio. Then, faintly, a sound. Breathing. A woman's breathing. "Mara," he whispered. The static thickened. A crackle, then a voice, barely audible. "Ethan." He stood motionless, the words slicing through him. "Mara, where are you? What's happening?" No answer. Just more static. He could hear the tremor of her voice beneath it, urgent, frightened. Then the words came again, clearer this time. "Ethan, don't trust them." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, pulse hammering. The words echoed in the air long after the silence returned. Don't trust them. Who was them? The police? The neighbor? Someone else entirely? He turned toward the hallway, the darkness feeling alive now, aware. His reflection in the window looked like someone else, someone watching. Outside, thunder rolled far away, and the streetlight flickered out. Ethan gripped the note in his hand, its paper damp from sweat. He didn't know who they were, but the whisper of rain against the glass told him one thing. Someone else was listening too. The phone lay silent now, its black screen reflecting his pale face. The echo of her voice, "Don't trust them," still clung to the air. Ethan sat motionless, staring into the dark window until dawn began to seep through the clouds. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. When the first thin light of morning broke, he moved. Slowly, methodically, he searched every inch of the house. He needed to find something, anything, that explained what Mara had meant. Drawers opened, closets emptied, boxes overturned. The rooms felt foreign now, like someone else's home. In the hallway upstairs, he stopped before the attic door. A narrow wooden frame with a brass lock that hadn't been touched in years. Mara never let him go up there. Whenever he'd asked, she'd smile lightly and say, "It's just storage, nothing worth climbing for." But now, that seemed like a lie. Ethan retrieved the small toolbox from under the stairs. His hands trembled as he picked the lock. The metal gave way with a tired click. The air that drifted out was thick with dust and the faint scent of cedar. He climbed the creaking steps, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and old furniture lay beneath white sheets. It was quiet, too quiet. The beam landed on a small wooden trunk pushed against the far wall. Something about it felt deliberate, placed, not forgotten. He knelt beside it. The lid was wrapped in an old scarf, one of Mara's. He recognized the faded floral pattern instantly. His stomach turned as he unwound it. The trunk wasn't locked. Inside, layers of paper and photographs lay bundled together, tied with twine. At the top sat a photograph, one that shouldn't exist. Mara stood beside a man Ethan didn't recognize, her hair shorter, her smile guarded. The date on the back read, June 14, 2015, 3 years before they met. His pulse quickened. Someone had written across the bottom in heavy ink, "Property of Project Halcyon." Ethan's throat tightened. He shuffled through the rest of the box, scattered documents, half-burned letters, fragments of typed reports stamped with faded government seals. Words like subject memory sequencing and reintegration protocol leapt out at him. None of it made sense. He sat back on the cold floorboards, the flashlight trembling in his grip. Mara had kept this hidden, locked away, never mentioned it. Had she been involved in something before they met? Something she couldn't escape? The floor creaked behind him. He froze. He turned off the flashlight, holding his breath. Through the attic window, a weak beam of daylight spilled in. Then, faintly, the sound of an engine. He crawled toward the window, brushing aside the dust. Outside, on the street below, a black sedan idled by the curb, engine running, lights off. No one got out. Ethan's heart pounded. He crouched there, watching, afraid to move. The driver's silhouette was faintly visible, motionless, waiting for him. After a long minute, the engine revved and the car pulled away, disappearing down the narrow street. Ethan exhaled, trying to steady his hands. He looked back at the photograph of Mara and the stranger, at the words scrawled across it, Project Halcyon. Whatever she'd been running from wasn't over. He placed the photo back in the box, wrapping it in the scarf again. But as he stood to leave, he noticed something written on the underside of the trunk lid, faint pencil marks, almost rubbed out. If you find this, it means they've found you too. The breath caught in his throat. The meaning was clear. Somewhere beyond the attic walls, a car door slammed. Ethan didn't move for a long time. The sound of the car door outside had faded, but the weight of it remained, pressing against his chest. He stood by the attic window, waiting for movement that never came. When he finally descended the steps, the house felt smaller, like the walls were leaning closer. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might have seen something, Mrs. Lorne, the neighbor across the street. She'd lived there since before Ethan and Mara moved in, always watching from her porch, cigarette in hand, eyes sharp despite her age. He slipped on his jacket and stepped into the damp morning air. The rain had stopped, leaving everything coated in a dull, reflective sheen. Mrs. Lorne was already outside, sweeping her porch with slow, deliberate strokes. "Morning, Mrs. Lorne," Ethan called softly. His voice cracked on the last word. She looked up, squinting. "Ethan, you look like you've seen a ghost." He hesitated before answering. "Mara's gone. She left last night, just disappeared." Mrs. Lorne set the broom aside. "I know." The chill that ran through him wasn't from the wind. "You know." She nodded once. "Saw her leave. Around midnight, maybe a bit after." She wasn't alone. Ethan felt the world tilt. "What do you mean, she wasn't alone?" The old woman's eyes narrowed, studying him. "A man was waiting by your gate. Tall, dark coat, didn't look like anyone from around here." She walked straight to him, didn't even look back. His pulse quickened. "Did you see his face?" "Not clearly. But," she hesitated, glancing toward the road. "I've seen him before. Years ago. When the family before you lived in that house." Ethan frowned. "What family?" "The Callahans. Nice couple. The wife disappeared too." Her words hit like a stone dropped in water, small, but the ripples were endless. "You're saying someone else vanished from that house?" Mrs. Lorne nodded slowly. "Exact same way. Middle of the night. No sign of struggle. Just gone. A man in a dark coat picked her up, and by morning, nothing but questions." Ethan tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He thought of the box in the attic, the faded photo marked Project Halcyon, the line that warned him they'd found him too. "Mrs. Lorne," he said carefully, "did you see which way they went?" She shook her head. "No. The car didn't have headlights on. Just drifted down the street and vanished into the fog." He stared at her, searching for disbelief, for some sign she was mistaken. But her gaze held steady, cold and certain. As he turned to leave, she called after him, her voice low. "Ethan, whatever's happening in that house, it isn't new. And that note she left, it wasn't written for you." He stopped. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Lorne's broom scraped once across the wet porch. "It was meant for whoever came next." Her words lingered in the air long after he walked away. When he reached his front door, Ethan looked back. Mrs. Lorne was gone. The porch was empty. Only the faint curl of cigarette smoke drifted through the air, twisting upward like a warning. Ethan barely remembered walking back inside. Mrs. Lorne's words clung to him like the damp air. "It wasn't meant for you." He replayed them again and again, the sound of her broom still scraping faintly in his mind. By the time he reached the kitchen, his hands were shaking. The phone sat on the counter where he'd left it. He didn't want to call the police. Something in Mara's voice, "Don't trust them," still echoed in his head. But the rational part of him knew he had to. The longer he waited, the colder her trail would become. He dialed. The dispatcher's tone was detached, procedural. Within the hour, a detective arrived. Detective Rowan was tall, early 40s, with a tired face and the kind of calm that seemed practiced. His shoes left wet prints on the floor as he stepped inside, scanning the room as if he'd already been there before. "You're Ethan Keller," Rowan said, flipping open a small notebook. "You reported your wife missing early this morning?" Ethan nodded. "She left in the middle of the night. No message except a note." Rowan's brow creased. "Can I see it?" Ethan hesitated, then handed him the folded paper. Rowan studied it, his thumb tracing the faint second line. "It's happening again." His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Where did you find this?" "On the nightstand. Next to her phone." Rowan nodded slowly, then glanced around the room. "Mind if I look around?" Ethan agreed, watching as the detective moved methodically from room to room, taking photos, jotting quick notes. When Rowan reached the attic door, Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "There's nothing up there," he said quickly. Rowan paused, then offered a polite smile. "I'll just have a quick look." Ethan's pulse hammered as he followed him up the stairs. The air in the attic was thick with dust, still disturbed from Ethan's earlier search. Rowan knelt beside the trunk, touching the scarf that hid the box beneath. "What's this?" "Just old stuff," Ethan said. Rowan hummed thoughtfully, closing the lid again without pressing. "You mentioned your wife's maiden name was Keller as well?" Ethan frowned. "No, she took my name. Her maiden name was Price." Rowan made a small note in his pad. "Price, right?" When they returned downstairs, Rowan stepped outside to take a call. Ethan, restless, drifted toward the detective's coat, draped over the chair. The edge of a manila folder peeked from the pocket. He told himself not to look, but his hand moved anyway. He slid the folder free just enough to glimpse the tab. The label read, "Mark Keller, reopened case, 2015. His heart stuttered. Reopened? He flipped the cover an inch. Inside were black and white photos, faces blurred by time, documents stamped classified. And there, near the bottom, was a printed sheet labeled Persons of Interest. The first name stopped him cold. Ethan Keller. He snapped the folder shut, slipping it back into the coat just as Rowan stepped in, ending his call. The detective gave a faint, unreadable smile. "Mr. Keller," he said, "thank you for your cooperation. We'll be in touch." Ethan forced a nod, every muscle tight. As Rowan left, the sound of his car faded into the distance. Ethan sank into the nearest chair, his mind spinning. The date on that file, 2015. The same year stamped on Mara's photograph. The same project name written across it. Whatever Project Halcyon was, the detective already knew. And somehow, so did he. Outside, thunder rumbled again, low and distant, like a warning returning from the past. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The house felt like a crime scene, his own breath too loud, every shadow watching. The detective's visit had left more questions than answers. Mara Keller, reopened case, 2015. The words circled his mind like vultures. Case. Why reopened? By morning, he couldn't stay inside any longer. He grabbed Mara's phone again, scrolling through every folder, every backup. Deep in her email drafts, one unsent message caught his eye. Subject line, "If anything happens." Inside, a single sentence. Room 12, Highway 17 Motel. The key is under my name. Ethan's pulse kicked hard. He didn't think, he just moved. The highway stretched empty beneath a bruised sky, miles of cracked asphalt glistening with leftover rain. When he finally pulled into the motel lot, the sign above flickered weakly, Lakeview Inn. A single row of rooms faced the parking lot, their doors peeling paint and silence. The manager, a heavy-set man behind the counter, barely looked up from his newspaper. Ethan cleared his throat. "My wife, Mara Keller, stayed here recently. She left a key for me." The man grunted, flipping through a drawer. Yeah. Said someone might come by. Room 12. He handed over a tarnished brass key. Checkouts at noon. Ethan walked down the row, each step heavier than the last. Room 12 was at the end, beside a broken vending machine humming faintly. He slid the key in. The lock turned too easily, like it had been used more than once. Inside, the air was stale, curtains drawn, faint smell of cigarettes and rain. The bed was untouched, the lights dim. On the small table sat three things: a cassette recorder, a folded map, and a Polaroid photograph. He picked up the photo first. It was him, sleeping in his own bed. Taken from the doorway. A chill spread through him, slow and deliberate. He flipped it over. On the back, in Mara's handwriting, "They know when you dream." He set it down, heart pounding, and opened the map. Red circles marked places across the region. Small towns, dead-end roads, abandoned buildings. One circle was darker than the rest, drawn again and again. Lake Arvin. The ink had bled through the paper. Ethan turned to the cassette recorder. A small tag was taped to it. "Play me." He pressed the button. Static hissed, followed by the crackle of Mara's voice. "Ethan, if you found this, it means they're watching you now." Her tone trembled but remained steady, as if she'd rehearsed the words. Project Halcyon wasn't a research program. It was an experiment on us. They erased our memories, changed our lives, and made us believe we were new people. The tape clicked once. Silence. Then a breath. "They'll come for you too. Don't go to the police. Don't trust anyone who says they can help. If you want answers, go to the lake. You'll remember everything there." The tape stopped. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the recorder as if it might start speaking again. The air around him thickened, the weight of truth pressing down. His reflection in the dark TV screen looked older, unfamiliar. He gathered the photo, the map, the tape, stuffing them into his jacket. As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse through the blinds, a black sedan parked across the street, engine idling. The same one from his house. Ethan's hand trembled as he switched off the light. The room fell into shadow, silent except for the rain starting up again. He didn't know who was in that car, or how long they'd been waiting. But he knew where he had to go next. The drive back from the motel felt longer than it should have. The rain followed him the entire way, washing the world into streaks of gray. Ethan couldn't shake the sound of Mara's voice from the tape. "They erased our memories." Every syllable felt like a fracture splintering deeper inside him. By the time he reached town, his hands had stopped trembling, replaced by a numb focus. He needed proof. If the detective had a file on Mara, there had to be more, something that tied all of this together. Rowan's office wasn't hard to find. A single light glowed behind frosted glass in the precinct's east wing, even after hours. Ethan parked 2 blocks away and waited for the rain to mask his footsteps. The streets were empty, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt. The building door clicked open easily, someone had forgotten to lock it. He moved through the narrow corridor, his shoes silent against the tile. Rowan's nameplate gleamed faintly on the door ahead. He tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the office smelled of paper and stale coffee. Files were stacked in neat towers, their labels precise and dated. The desk lamp cast a cone of yellow light over a clutter of folders and half-empty mugs. Ethan shut the door behind him and began searching. Drawer by drawer, file by file, nothing on Mara. Then, at the back of a lower cabinet, he found a locked metal box. A small sticker on its lid read Halcyon, restricted. His pulse quickened. He forced it open with a letter opener. Inside were photographs, reports, surveillance notes. The first photo showed Mara standing in front of a white building marked with a faded government seal. The second photo, of Ethan, was worse. It was him and Mara together, months before they had ever met. He stared at it, disbelief hollowing his chest. Same faces. Same smiles. But the date stamp was 3 years too early. A chill ran through him as he unfolded a printed document clipped to the photos. Project Halcyon, Subject Reinstatement Protocol. Participants: Price/E. Keller. Cycle, 3rd sequence pending review. There were notes scribbled in the margins. Memory degradation detected. Subject relationship intact. Ethan's throat tightened. Third sequence. That meant 2 had come before. 2 times he'd lived this life and forgotten it. He scrolled through the digital files on Rowan's computer, searching for more. The folder names blurred past until one stopped him cold. Halcyon _ originals. He opened it. 2 identical photos appeared side by side, Mara in both. The same pose, same background, but subtle differences. In one, her eyes were softer, human. In the other, colder, slightly off, like a reflection of someone pretending to be her. Only one was labeled original. Ethan stared at the screen until the light began to flicker. His reflection warped in the monitor's glass, blending with hers. He didn't know what was real anymore. Her, the memories, or the version of himself that still believed they'd met by chance. A noise from the hallway snapped him back. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. He closed the files and backed away from the desk just as the office door handle began to turn. Ethan slipped out of the precinct seconds before the door opened behind him. The echo of footsteps followed, but the rain outside swallowed the sound. He ran until the building disappeared behind a curtain of fog, breath ragged, mind spinning. The word original burned in his skull. By the time dawn crept across the horizon, he was already driving north, toward Lake Arvin. The map from the motel lay on the passenger seat, its ink still smeared from rain. The red circle around the lake bled like a wound. The further he drove, the quieter the world became. The asphalt cracked into dirt, and the forest closed in on both sides. He followed the narrow path until the trees opened to a clearing. A small cabin, half collapsed, standing alone beside the water. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt wrong. The curtains were drawn. A light flickered once inside, then vanished. Ethan parked a distance away and approached on foot. Every step sank into soft, wet earth. The air smelled of pine and rust. As he reached the door, he saw faint writing carved into the wood, letters barely visible through the moss. Remember what they did to us. He pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and silence. The walls were covered in faint scrawls, notes, fragments, drawings, all in Mara's handwriting. Cycle 1 failed. They changed the sequence. He doesn't remember me. Ethan's chest tightened. His name appeared again and again, always followed by different dates. On the table sat a folder identical to the one he'd seen in Rowan's office. He opened it slowly. Inside were documents, photos, and a copy of the same photograph from the attic, the one with Mara and the stranger. Only this time, the man's face wasn't blurred. Ethan froze. The man was him. His knees nearly gave out. He stared at the image, disbelief twisting into nausea. Mara hadn't hidden the truth from him. She'd tried to protect him from remembering it. A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan spun around, heart hammering. A man stood in the doorway, older, rain-soaked, face shadowed beneath a hood. He held no weapon, just a look of exhaustion that mirrored Ethan's own. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The stranger stepped closer, lowering his hood. His eyes were the same shade as Mara's. "Her brother," he said. "At least, I was before they made her forget." Ethan's voice shook. "What is this? What did they do to us?" The man sighed, looking past him to the lake. Project Halcyon started as memory reconstruction. They wanted to rebuild love, manufacture connection, test how far the human mind could be rewritten before it breaks. You and Mara were the control subjects. Every few years, they erased you both and reset the experiment. Ethan felt the floor sway beneath him. "You're saying none of this is real?" "It's real," the man replied softly. "Just not the first time." He slid a folder across the table. Ethan opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a wedding photo, himself and Mara standing by a lake, the same one outside. The same cabin. The date printed at the bottom, October 19th, 2011. The man's voice broke the silence. They called it Subject Reinstatement Protocol. But to her it was love. She tried to end it. Every time she warned you, they wiped her clean and started again. Ethan stared down at the photo, his vision blurring. "Why show me this?" "Because she's gone for good this time." They won't start another cycle. He stepped back toward the doorway. But you still can. Still can what? Ethan demanded. The man met his eyes. Remember? Then he was gone, disappearing into the mist like he'd never been there. Ethan turned toward the lake. The surface was still, a mirror of the sky. And in that reflection, two figures stood, his and Mara's, hand in hand. He blinked and she was gone. Behind him, the folder lay open, the pages fluttering in the cold wind. One slipped free, landing at his feet. On it, a final line in Mara's handwriting. If you love me, don't let them start again. Ethan looked toward the horizon, where the first sirens began to echo through the trees. The sirens faded behind him as Ethan stood alone by the lake. The dawn light was thin and silver, casting the water in an endless mirror. His reflection trembled with every breath. Mara's final words echoed in his mind. If you love me, don't let them start again. He turned the page over in his hands. Beneath her handwriting was something faint, barely visible until he tilted it toward the light. A code written in pencil, numbers and letters in uneven rows. It looked like coordinates. Ethan traced them with his thumb. They pointed back toward town, to a place he knew all too well. The research center near the edge of Holbrook, long abandoned, surrounded by fences and rusted warning signs. By the time he reached his car, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale hollow. He drove in silence, every memory fragment rearranging itself inside his head. Mara laughing, the attic, the motel tape, the stranger's face. The pieces were forming something he didn't want to see. The center loomed ahead, an old concrete structure with faded letters spelling Halcyon Institute. Half the windows were shattered, vines curling through the cracks. Ethan forced the gate open and stepped inside. The halls were silent except for the soft hum of electricity still running somewhere beneath the floor. Lights flickered weakly in the distance. He followed them until he reached a glass room filled with monitors and old computers. Dust covered everything. On the far wall hung a whiteboard with a single phrase scrawled across it, "Memory is mercy." Ethan's chest tightened. He powered on one of the monitors. After a few seconds, the screen came alive with lines of code and a list of files, each labeled with a date and two initials, EK/MP. His fingers trembled as he opened the most recent one. A video loaded. The grainy footage showed a sterile room, bright lights, cold walls. Two chairs faced each other. In one sat Mara, pale and tired. Across from her, Ethan. But it wasn't this Ethan. It was him, before the reset. A voice off-screen spoke. Cycle 3 complete. Prepare for erasure. Mara turned to the camera, tears streaming down her face. Please, don't start it again. He deserves to remember. He deserves to know what they did. The image flickered, and the technician's voice returned. You understand this means termination of your loop. I understand, she whispered. Mine. Let him live with it. Ethan stepped back, his stomach twisting. He fast-forwarded the video. His past self sat motionless as a light flared behind him, then darkness. The feed ended with a static hum. He stood in the silence that followed, struggling to breathe. Mara hadn't disappeared. She traded her existence for his freedom, to end the cycle once and for all. His hands shook as he opened another folder marked Final Transmission. Inside was a text document, just a single line of writing. Ethan, if you ever find this, I need you to remember that love isn't something they can build. It's what survives after they've erased everything else. He stared at it for a long time, feeling something shift inside him, an ache he couldn't name. When he stepped outside, the wind had picked up again. The lake shimmered faintly through the trees in the distance, the same reflection he'd seen before. But now, beneath the surface, a faint light glowed, steady and warm. Ethan understood. It wasn't a beacon. It was a grave. He knelt by the shore as the first ripples spread across the water. The note, the files, the memories, they weren't warnings. They were goodbyes. And then, faintly, from the wind itself, came her voice. Don't forget me. Ethan closed his eyes, whispering back into the mist, never again. The ripples faded. The reflection stilled. Behind him, a soft click broke the silence. A door opening where none should exist.